At exactly 11:03 p.m., my phone lit up with a message from my neighbor. I almost ignored it because I had spent the entire evening trying to convince myself that some people's problems were not my responsibility. But then I read her words, "My husband's asleep. Are you free to talk?" What happened after that message changed the way I looked at the quiet house next door, and it taught me that sometimes the person smiling across the fence is silently begging someone to notice they are hurting. Before we continue, if you believe everyone deserves kindness, second chances, and someone willing to listen, please take a moment to like this video, share it with someone who might need hope, leave a comment, and subscribe to Ripple of Kindness. You never know whose life might be touched by a simple story. My name is Daniel, and I had lived in the same neighborhood for almost 6 years. The houses were close enough that everyone knew when someone bought a new car, painted their fence, or went away for vacation. But somehow, we rarely knew what was happening behind closed doors. My neighbor, Emma, lived in the pale blue house beside mine with her husband, Mark. From the outside, they looked like an ordinary couple. Mark worked long hours, Emma stayed mostly at home, and every Sunday morning they sometimes walked to the small cafe at the corner. I had exchanged polite greetings with them dozens of times, but I had never really spoken to Emma beyond small talk. There was something about her, though, that I had noticed over the years. She smiled often, but her smile never seemed to reach her eyes. Sometimes, while carrying groceries from her car, she would stop halfway to the front door and stare into nothing for several seconds. If she noticed me, she would quickly smile and wave. I always assumed she was tired. I never imagined that she was fighting a battle nobody could see. That night, after receiving her message, I stared at the screen for nearly a minute. I wondered whether she needed help, whether something had happened, or whether she simply wanted someone to talk to. Finally, I replied that I was awake and asked if everything was okay. The typing bubble appeared, disappeared, and appeared again. Then she sent a single sentence, "I don't know who else I can talk to." A few seconds later, she asked if she could come to my porch. I turned on the outside light and waited. When the door opened, Emma stood there wearing an oversized sweater, her hair loosely tied back, and an expression I had never seen on her face before. She looked exhausted. Not physically exhausted, but emotionally drained, as if she had been carrying something heavy for years. She sat on the porch steps and kept her hands folded tightly in her lap. For several moments, neither of us spoke. Then she quietly admitted that she had been thinking about leaving Mark. Not because of another man, not because she wanted a different life, and not because she hated him. She simply could not remember the last time she felt like herself. Mark controlled nearly everything in their home. He questioned every purchase, every phone call, and every person she spoke to. He told her that her friends were a bad influence and that her family only wanted money. Slowly, Emma had stopped seeing people. Then she stopped working. Eventually, she stopped believing that she could survive without him. The most painful part was that Mark had never hit her. Because of that, Emma had spent years convincing herself that what she experienced was not serious enough to call abuse. She told herself that other women had it worse. She told herself that marriage required sacrifice. She told herself that if she became quieter, kinder, and more patient, he would eventually become the man she had married. But that night, sitting beneath the porch light, she finally whispered that she was scared. I asked her what had happened that evening. She looked toward her house and said Mark had found an old photograph of her mother. He had accused her of secretly communicating with her family and had thrown the photograph into the trash. Her mother had passed away 3 years earlier, and that photograph was one of the few things Emma had left. She said she had stood in the kitchen watching him destroy something precious and suddenly realized she had spent years watching pieces of herself disappear in exactly the same way. I did not know what to say. I wanted to tell her to leave immediately, but I knew real life was more complicated than that. She had no job, little money, and nowhere she felt safe enough to go. So instead of giving her a dramatic speech, I listened. For nearly 2 hours, Emma talked. She told me about the dreams she had abandoned, the friendships she had lost, and the little things she missed about herself. She used to paint. She loved waking up early and drinking coffee while watching the sunrise. She wanted to travel. She once dreamed of opening a small art studio for children. As she spoke, I realized that she was not asking me to rescue her. She was asking someone to remind her that she still existed. The next morning, Emma knocked on my door before sunrise. She looked nervous but determined. She said she had made a decision. She wanted to start rebuilding her life, one small step at a time. I helped her contact a local support organization and a trusted relative she had been afraid to call. She began applying for work again. She retrieved important documents and quietly made a plan to become financially independent. Nothing happened overnight. There were setbacks, tears, and moments when fear almost convinced her to return to the life she knew. But slowly, things changed. 3 months later, I saw Emma standing in her driveway holding a cardboard box filled with her paintings. She had moved into a small apartment across town. It was modest, but it was hers. She had found part-time work at a community art center and had started teaching children to paint on Saturday mornings. One afternoon, she invited me to the center's first small exhibition. On one wall hung a painting of a dark house with a tiny yellow window glowing in the distance. Beside it was a painting of a woman standing beneath a sunrise. Emma told me the first painting represented the years when she felt trapped. The second represented the night she finally asked someone to listen. I stood there quietly, realizing how close I had come to ignoring that 11:03 p.m. message. Sometimes we think changing someone's life requires money, power, or extraordinary courage. But sometimes it begins with something much smaller, answering the phone, opening the door, sitting beside someone, and saying, "I'm listening." Emma eventually became one of my closest friends. She never forgot that night, and neither did I. She once told me that she hadn't needed someone to solve her life. She had simply needed proof that she wasn't alone. If this story touched your heart, please like the video, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and subscribe to Ripple of Kindness. Your engagement helps these stories reach people who may be quietly struggling behind their own closed doors. And before you leave, comment, "Someone is listening," if you believe that one small act of kindness can give a person the courage to begin again. Because you may never know what someone is carrying behind a smile. You may never know how close they are to giving up. And sometimes, the most powerful thing you can give another human being isn't money or advice. It is your time. It is your attention. It is the simple reassurance that they are not alone.